Well, welcome. One of the things I like to do whenever I'm looking at these databases is just simply type in the topic, what I'm writing my dissertation over, um, and it's just a quick search of Fort Belknap just to see what pops up. Now, one of the problems is there's an Indian reservation in Montana that goes by. It's Fort Belknap Indian Reservation, so I have to separate those two out. But it's always interesting to see what comes up. In doing that through this database, three articles popped up. One of those I've already talked about. I discussed in a previous video. And I had these two other articles that popped up. They're two separate articles, but they're connected. And it's really kind of interesting. The first article was by Glenn Ely, and it's the title of it is Bedlam at Belknap. And it's a chapter in his book on the Butterfield stagecoach. And this entire chapter talks about the lawlessness that was happening at Fort Belknap. One of the things about this fort was right next to the fort, a town sprang up. And while the soldiers here did help police the town, and there was a city marshal and there was a sheriff, it just seemed to be too much crime for the soldiers to handle. In one instance, you have the 2nd Cavalry in 1858 under George H. Thomas. There was a man at a saloon had gotten drunk and mouthed off to one of the soldiers of the 2nd Cavalry, and then they got into a little fight. The newspaper article reads really weird, but anyway, there's some kind of they got into a fight. Well, then all of a sudden, like these 2nd Cavalry soldiers are just there's a mob of these soldiers, and they're just shooting holes into this drunk guy. And it's not until George H. Thomas rides his horse between the soldiers and that man that they stop shooting. And Glenn Ely talks about that in his book. It kind of focuses like on the alcohol problem. It was very hard to get alcohol. You could only get alcohol in a saloon, independent, like I guess what we think of carry out. You couldn't have your personal alcohol. You had to go to a saloon to get it. It was outlawed here at the fort, but what's funny is like the soldiers being creative would figure out their way to get their spirits in, and that became a huge problem, not just because of the problems with drunkenness, but then the medical conditions that come with it. And it kind of leads into what the second article is about. It's titled Medical Conditions at West Texas Military Posts in Texas in the 1850s. And of course, that's perfect timing for what I'm looking at. At the post surgeon, at the infirmary at the fort, there was what they called medicinal bourbon, and it was used to treat ailments. And we've got instances where soldiers intentionally hurt themselves a specific way so that they could get alcohol. I find that very amusing, but it also really opens your eyes to how bad life was out here on the frontier. But not only that, another thing that the article really opened my eyes up to, and I kind of knew this, but whenever we think of like the West Texas, we think in our mind, we kind of think of John West Cowboys, or John Wayne Cowboys and Indians shootouts and stuff like that. Of the 30,000 soldiers that served on the West Texas frontier from 1848 to 1868, 30,000 soldiers within 20 years, only 32 were died from gunshot wounds. Only 32. Most of it was from disease, malaria. I just found that fascinating because you just think that, I mean, if you died on the frontier, it was because you got shot, or bow and arrow got you. But no, only 32. Now, there were 270 injuries. but only 32 deaths. I just really found that fascinating. Anyway, so both of these articles were very, very insightful, and not only the article, the information on the article themselves, but the notes in the articles I found very, very insightful.